Okay, today I'm going to be showing you how to rekey your just a standard Kwikset deadbolt. And today I'm going to make sure to rekey it in such a way that not just one but two keys will work for your Kwikset deadbolt as well. In order to do this, we're going to be using some basic tools. I have your follower, which we'll go over what that exactly does in a few minutes, and we can go over that. It kind of removes the plug from the actual housing for the lock itself. A standard pair of tweezers is extremely helpful when you're dealing with all these small little pins that you'll have to use, and that's a nice little tool to have. And then also an ice pick, which you can use a lot of different tools besides an ice pick, but I use an ice pick just because it's easier. It seems to work for me. And of course you'll need two keys that you'll be keying the actual lock to, and I'll show you how exactly that works out as well when we're done. The first thing that I want to make sure to go over is the actual how exactly the lock works and how key cut codes are associated with your actual lock as well. If you look at your standard Kwikset key, your standard Kwikset key has 5 cuts in it. So when you look at the key, you'll actually see 5 different depths, or at least 5 different sections. They could all be similar depths, but at least different sections for things. And if you can look at this one, if the camera can adjust well enough, you'll see the first one here, then the next one gets deep, and then of course more shallow, then just a tad bit deeper as well. Each key has a certain key cut code associated with it. This one, the key cut code is 34212. And if you look at it, you can actually see 3, 4. So 3 is the first cut here next to the shoulder, 4 is a tad bit deeper, and then 2, and then 1 is of course very shallow in 2. So the higher the key cut code, the actual deeper the cut is in the key. It's also important to note that when you are cutting keys, that when you look at the actual code itself, this particular one is 34212, that the code always starts from the shoulder of the key to the tip of the key. So 34212, and any other numbers you might have, it also just works its way down on that as well. When you are working with keys, you'll also use a bitting, which is the actual small pins that you'll use for the actual assembly of your actual lock. To go over the actual lock, this is your standard Kwikset deadbolt that you'll probably take out of the door lock after you disassemble everything and remove it and uninstall it. You'll see on the back you have your standard spindle. You also have a clip that's on the back. It's a small black piece here that actually keeps this spindle stuck into the back of the lock. You have your lock housing, which is actually part of that deadbolt. It comes out of this collar that's here. So if you're looking at it when you install it, it actually looks like this, but this will all pop out. If you've installed any number of these, you'll kind of know what that looks like. Then you'll have your spring cap, which actually keeps all your springs and all your other lock pieces kind of in one spot. And then you'll have your plug, which is the actual keyed part here, and it can be removed from this actual housing, and I'll show you how that works in just a few minutes as well. So let's go ahead and get started. And the best thing you actually want to start with first is to get the plug out of your housing. And the best way to do that is I hold my fingernail against this actual clip. Clips come in kind of all different shapes and sizes as well. Some you'll have screws on. They have to kind of unscrew to get on first. The clips serve kind of two purposes. They hold in the spindle so that whenever your key actually turns back and forth, it'll turn the actual plunger inside the lock. But then it also holds your plug in place so that way when your key actually comes in contact, or causes the pins to come in contact with the shear line that's inside your lock, it keeps the actual lock and the plug from being just removed on its own. And you'll kind of see how that works once the clip gets removed on things. For these particular ones, this is where your ice pick is going to come into play. It's kind of handy. If you put your fingernail on one end of this thing, then you're able to use your other finger to pry this piece off. It comes off relatively easy, but that's why the ice pick is kind of handy, just to make sure it comes off and doesn't hurt your hand, especially if you try to do a bunch of these at one time. The ice pick is incredibly helpful. As you can see, this is a tiny little piece. You want to make sure to keep it somewhere where you won't lose it. It's incredibly important. You'd hate to have to replace a whole lock just because you lost this tiny little piece here, so definitely a pain. Once you have that, you can remove the spindle. Just pops off, no big deal. Also want to hold on to that piece and make sure it doesn't get lost. Normally, I work on some kind of dark towel, so that way any kind of pieces I drop or anything else don't bounce off. Currently, I'm just at home, so I'm working on a hardtop table here, kind of make it easy on things. Currently, right now, I have this lock keyed to work with just this key. It's the key I showed you just a moment ago, and as you can see, it actually works relatively well inside the lock. Since I do have that clip removed and everything else, the plug can move in and out of the actual housing, as you can see. So that's what I mean by that clip holding that thing in there. So if you're ever testing keys and you think you got a good key and you go to pull out that key because you think it's working just fine, well, you may have a kind of surprise in a game of picking up tiny little lock parts if you ever do that. So make sure if you are testing keys to make sure to have lots of tension and pressure pushing that key in, so that way that sucker doesn't pop out on you. But once you have your working key in the lock, you want to give it kind of just a quarter turn, just barely, not a huge thing. Here's zero position, and turn it just a quarter, and you'll want to then use your follower tool. Some followers have a mortise cylinder capability on it as well. That's what these little notches are for. But for all your standard Kwikset, you'll want to use this end to actually start with. You'll put that end on this end of your actual plug, and you'll just follow the key out. And you'll want to hold it with one hand, kind of push with your palm, and your plug comes out. The reason this is extremely important is on here you can see the pins that are kind of in there as well. Set this down and take out your key so you can kind of see how those move with everything. Okay, now that you have this apart, the plug plug follower is an extremely important tool, because what this allows you to do is keep the other internal components of your lock. There's springs, and there's also top pins that are inside this lock that act as spacers so that all your other pins and plugs can work. And the plug follower actually keeps all that in place up here at the top of the lock. That way you don't have to reassemble everything, and you only have to work with the actual plug itself. Kind of makes things relatively simple. Once you have everything out, normally for the keying process you'll probably be throwing these away. You'll have a cup or something to put those in so you can kind of keep some extras on hand. But for this particular exercise, I'm just going to dump them out here to the side so you can kind of see what they look like. And I can go over the different pins that we'll be using for things. This is where your tweezers are going to come into play. Extremely handy. But to talk about pins for a second, I have a kind of large pinning kit that I use on a daily basis, and you'll see that I have kind of the different bins labeled. So I have a 1B, 2B, 3B, 4B, and 5B, and I also have some M's there in the back: 1M, 2M, 3M, 4, and 5M. The way that these are labeled is there's bottom pins and there are top pins, and there are some incredibly some important differences between the two of them that are important to understand. For your bottom pins, grab a 4 bottom pin so you can see it. And it's probably one of those things that's going to be incredibly difficult to see on this video, but a bottom pin is curved on both the top and the bottom of the pin. It's what allows the actual parts of the key for these slopes, allows that bottom pin to ride up and down on those as the key goes in and out of the lock. If you mistake a top pin for a bottom pin and you put the top pin in first, the key will not be able to ride back and forth on those and kind of make your lock really sticky. Another reason why a lock can get sticky is because those slopes on a bottom pin have kind of worn down to a point to where they no longer are the correct size, and that can make it kind of difficult as well. But bottom pins are also much longer than top pins. So you have your standard 4 bottom pin. Get that where I can stand up again. So that's your standard 4, and your actual 4 top pin is this tiny little thing here. So you can kind of see the differences as far as a top pin and a bottom pin. There are some important things, but size, more than anything, you can probably tell them apart pretty easily. Okay. Okay. On the next video now, we'll start trying to assemble our lock using the bitting information that we have, and we can see about getting this lock put back together, and so we can make the key lock actually work with two different keys.